And I think we'll go ahead and get going now. It's about 5 after. Welcome to the people who are here, and I would like to start by asking a few questions. I'll tell you a little bit more about me in a couple of minutes, but I'd like to start by asking some questions. One is, and I apologize, we're using PDF form tonight, so these slides do not build, but we'll be fine. If I could offer your salespeople at whatever companies you work at, if I could offer your sales team a set of tool or skills that would help them convert 25% more prospects into converted sales, to close sales deals, do you think that they would want that tool or skill? And I would ask, if you have operations or manufacturing or supply chain people at your company, if I could offer them a set of skills or tools that would help them decrease their raw material waste by 39%, do you think they'd be interested in that set of tools or skills? And then finally, if for your engineers, your scientists, or your continuous improvement professionals, if I could offer them a set of tools or skills that would help them get 29% more output from the same amount of inputs, do you think that they would want those skills or tools? And again, I'd encourage you to, if you want to participate, you can go into the chat window and put your answers in there. And when I do this in front of groups, they say, well, of course we would. And when I say, well, why would you want that? They say, well, it would deliver results, measurable results that would make a strong difference. And so I'd like to tell you about, as it turns out, leadership is that toolbox. There's an organization called the Corporate Executive Board, and this data that I'm going to share with you is from North and South America. So it's not Europe or North Africa or the Middle East, but I think you'll find that it would probably hold. What they found was, after studying 8,000 leaders in North and South America, they found that managers who met the threshold of being effective or highly effective, those people who were effective or highly effective at building others, they delivered 25% higher performance themselves, had a 39% higher retention rate of the better people, so the better people stayed on their teams, and the people on those teams, they had a 29% higher engagement score, which meant those people got better and more results out of fewer people than the less effective. So leadership really matters. But the negative part of that research was that only 2 out of 5, only 40% of the leaders were judged effective or highly effective. So our companies are accepting development systems that are underproducing. A Harvard Business Review article studying international companies from around the world found that 70% of those high potentials, those early leaders who had been believed to be great future talent, 70% of those high potential people had a flaw in a critical leadership skill they would need on day 1 of their next promotion. And then finally, Lloyd's of London, the great global insurer, they interviewed 500 CEOs of the largest companies in the world and gave them 90 risk factors to choose from and asked them to rank them. And what's kind of stunning, the number 1 global risk to those companies was the loss of customers. That was the thing most on those CEOs' mind. But the number 2 highest global risk to those CEOs was, will I be able to build or hire the leaders who will be able to solve my business problems of the future? And I find that remarkable, given what they had to choose from. They could choose from things like the interrupted flow of oil from your region of the world and other material inputs, natural disasters, political instability, government interference, big worries like that. And the number 2 thing on the mind of those CEOs is, will I be able to build leaders? So leadership matters because it delivers a better bottom line, but only 40% of current leaders are skilled. 70% of future leaders have real flaws in their leadership techniques, and this is such a big problem that the CEOs of the 500 largest companies in the world say it's the number 2 thing that keeps them up at night worrying about their business. So you might say, well, Corey, you're not much of a ray of sunshine today. You've got some pretty bad news. Where's the good news? And I would suggest to you that you people, the people on this webinar and listening to this message, you people are the good news in all of this, because you care deeply about the future of leadership in business, and you are in a position to make a big difference. So my name is Corey Bauk, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about me. I'm a training and development professional for Johnsonville Sausage. We're the #1 brand of sausage in the United States. But I have a pretty unusual background for someone in the training business. I'm a graduate of our Naval Academy, and while I was at the Naval Academy, my roommate was Jordanian, and I became friends, very good friends with the group of Muslim exchange midshipmen. And through that process, there were 2 classmates I have from the Egyptian Navy and 2 from the Jordanian Navy, and there were representatives from Turkey and Senegal. And my senior year in college, I fasted during Ramadan, and each night celebrated the end of the fast with the Muslim midshipmen. And when I was going through parachute training, I went through parachute training with Saudi and Egyptian officers, and I went to flight school. What I did in the Navy afterward, after the Naval Academy, was I was a naval flight officer, and I just wanted to share that with you. When I went through flight school, I also had Saudi and Egyptian classmates. So I have a great deal of respect and also affection for your region of the world, so it's a really big honor for me to get to spend time with you this evening. I got out of our Navy and became a marketing professional. I was a marketer for General Mills, a large international company with brands you recognize in the Middle East. I worked for Newell Rubbermaid, which is another large international marketing company, and then I came to Johnsonville as a marketer. I'm also an elected politician, and the last 5 years I've been in business training, doing training and development. And I recently published a book called The Lens of Leadership. And what I found in all of those very different kinds of jobs is I really only had to be good at 3 different things to have a very successful career. And those things are, I had to serve others and serve my customers and help them deliver better results, and to learn to build leaders. And I had to inspire people to become more than what they thought they could be. And so that will be the flow of our conversation this evening. We're going to talk about followership as a very powerful form of leadership, and we're going to talk about how you can market your own career and develop your own personal brand for being someone who can always be depended on to deliver superior results. And then we're going to talk near the end about succeeding in what I call moments that count. These are critical professional moments in our career. What I'd like to do is find out who is on here. We can't do polls like I thought we might be able to. So in the chat window, if Dina and Rami, if you would just say what you do at your company. Are you an individual contributor? Are you a manager, a director, or a vice president? If you could put that in the chat window and let us know the folks on the call tonight. Go down to send to everyone. There's Ram. Rami's a manager. And Rami, I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I'm wondering if Dina will be able to do that. Not sure what kind of device Dina is on. So why it becomes important is just that no matter what role you're in for your company, the serve, build, inspire model works for everyone. Now what I'd like you to do is, and now we have Mohammed joining us. Welcome. If in the upper left of your screen there is a blue arrow, and if you touch that blue arrow button, you can then put where you are joining us from. I'm not sure if all of you are in Cairo, but if you are, if you can just put your, or perhaps if you're joining us from Saudi, or you're joining us from Jordan, or perhaps this is just an opportunity for you to interact with us today. If you can make your pointer point to where you are. I am not in Jordan, so I'll make that disappear. Here, my pointer. Inviting you to in the upper left, and I'm not seeing it come through the screen. There's someone on the, hello. Someone on the video screen. It's nice to see you. We'll keep going. It looks like it may, perhaps on your end that functionality doesn't exist. So we'll go to the next page. So again, it's my honor to spend some time with you, and I don't want to presume that I can teach you anything, and that's not really my goal for today. What I do want to do is be a good journalist. I want to report to you some things that you may have heard about before, but I want to report it in a way that reminds you just how very important you are to so many different people. Welcome to whoever that is that just joined us. We're talking about me sharing my perspective and being very excited to be doing it at the American University in Cairo. So I'd like you to think about this question, and I'd like you to decide and answer it. Is your most important primary professional duty to make your boss look great? And in a polling, we would put this out, and we would see who agrees with this and who does not agree with that. We'll try that quickly. If people don't seem to be able to log in and put yes or no in the chat, you can select everyone and put yes or no in the chat. Would appreciate that. No. There's a no from Amy. Thank you. Dina manages a team of 10. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Well, however you answer that, you can keep that answer to yourself. But I'd like to, there's a no from Dina. Thank you, Dina. Excellent. And I'll tell you, what typically comes out when I do this in front of audiences as large as 400 or 500 people where they can all register. I use a device where they can all participate electronically. And it usually looks about 75 or 80% no and 10 or 20% yes, 15 or 20% yes. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask you a question. I have a friend who got pretty upset recently because his son's school canceled the yoga program. And there's an American sport called dodgeball that maybe you have not heard about, but he said, I bet they'd rather the kids just play dodgeball instead. And what he was doing was mistaking. Dodgeball is a game where you line up very closely, teams line across from each other, and you throw the ball at each other's head. It's the people on the other team's head, and if you whack them in the head, you tag them out. So it's a pretty aggressive sport. It's pretty violent, and it can be surprising because you can be looking for a ball from one direction and a ball can come out of nowhere and tag you in the head. And what my friend and I started talking about life in general, and what we talked about was that having a career is dodgeball. It's not yoga. Having in business in general is dodgeball. It's aggressive, it's competitive, and there are winners and losers. And the children that only do yoga will always end up working for the kids who only play dodgeball. And the reason I hope that you will be able to change the answer to that last question after we finish this webinar today is because that I believe that business is dodgeball. And by living the roles and skills of followership that we're going to talk about, you can make yourself very indispensable to your organization. And as training in the training and development community, sometimes it's hard to break ourselves out and stand out when there are competitive salespeople and marketers and engineers and scientists. And so to make ourselves essential to our organization, the roles and skills of followership can help us do that. And this notion, this competitive idea, this is nothing new. This is a quote from Harvard University from over 100 years ago. It's a quote from their handbook for students. It said, the door to success is always marked push, and that's what I just want us to be convinced of today, is to remind us that in the way we manage our careers and the way that we are successful in our companies is to sometimes push and create opportunities for ourselves by helping our boss and helping our team succeed. Deloitte, the great global consultancy, they also did a survey just out about a year ago saying that developing leaders was a top concern for them internationally. They have offices all over the world, and it was their #1 talent priority by the year 2015. And again, we talked about how it's the #2 highest global risk on that Lloyd's of London survey. And so what I'd like to mention here is that this leadership vacuum, this leadership gap that's happening all over the world, and in the United States, it's being caused by a generational impact. We have 75 million of a generation called the baby boomers who have begun to retire, and there are 75 million of them. The replacement generation, called Generation X, there are only 45 million of them, and so there aren't nearly enough to replace all of the leading baby boomers. So that generation after Generation X, they're going to be put in leadership positions that are way over their heads that they won't be prepared for. And as I understand it, in the Middle East, that there are so many young leaders that they're growing their careers so quickly that they're wonderful and bright and smart, but their numbers are so large that they just don't have the experience. And so whether it's in the Middle East where a large number of youth, inexperienced youth is the concern, or over here in the Western Hemisphere where baby boomers are leaving at a rate that those young people are going to be promoted very quickly, either way, the math on that is a great big leadership gap. That's what we have. And in emerging economies, think of India or China, where the economy is growing so quickly that they can't grow leaders fast enough. So we all have this leadership gap all over the world to overcome. And this is important because business is dodgeball. That leadership gap will hobble our organization. And it's my belief that the companies that will remain competitive over the next 3 decades are the ones who will learn to build great followers who go on to become very skilled leaders. So many of the leadership development processes our companies are using aren't working. You remember the earlier study that said that only 40% of leaders were effective or highly effective. And so I've written a book about a process that I call Serve, Build, Inspire, and I've seen the principles of this process work over the last 20 years in very different organizations, in military organizations, business organizations, political organizations, and I forgot to mention I taught at our Naval Academy as well, so I've worked in academia surrounded by PhDs and researchers. And so in all those very different kinds of careers, this Serve, Build, Inspire model works. And Dr. Ken Blanchard, the author of The 1 Minute Manager and several other books that you may be familiar with, calls the Serve, Build, Inspire model a true outline for success. So I'm very excited to have the opportunity to share this with you today. So I'd like you to raise your hand, and perhaps we don't have that feature here today, but think about whether you joined the Future Followers Club when you were in secondary school or at university. Did you join the Future Followers Club? Probably not. And you'd be welcome to, in the chat with each other as we go along, or answer these questions in the chat window. That would be wonderful. We have Yaham with us now as well. We're starting to gather some people. The second question is, have you read an Amazon top 10 book on being a follower? And I would say probably not. Most people shake their head when I ask them that question. And then the third question is, do you lie awake in bed at night dreaming about how your children will change the world by following? And I suspect you would answer no to that question. And the reason is, in today's competitive world, the books that people are reading are all about how to be successful by demonstrating leadership skills. But I think that those books start too late in the story of building leadership skills. I believe that a prequel or a pre-book was needed to explain the vital foundation of leadership that they skipped. I believe that followership is that foundation because it's the first form of leadership. And whether you're an experienced leader who's already developing others, an early leader who wants to get ahead faster, or an aspiring future leader who wants to expand your influence, mastering the roles and skills of followership will ensure that you deliver better results, get promoted faster, and inspire those around you to do the same. So let's talk a little bit about followership. It starts with serve, but not the kind necessarily of servant leadership you may have read about. It starts before that, when people are still individual contributors. And then followership never ends because everybody has a boss. You do, your boss has a boss, the vice president of human resources has a boss. The thing is that leaders are in the middle. Leaders start off serving up with their followership, but then when you get promoted into leadership, you serve down with your leadership. The best leaders never forget that even though they are leaders, they still need to serve up with their followership, because once you become a leader, you are in what I call this paradoxically simultaneous role of being both a follower and a leader. Now, in the United States, I would tell you that I think we spend too much time too early focusing on leadership. I think that we could be better off if we taught followership skills early in people's careers, if we would teach our children the principles of followership, and if we would teach our individual contributors the principle of followership, because it's such a critical way to be a more effective leader. So let's define followership, and if you have your note-taking guide, if you were able to to download your note-taking guide. Followership is a set of learnable, practicable skills that make me professionally essential to my boss and teammates. And also, and this is the secret part, when I do this seminar, sometimes I say the secret skills of leadership. Followership is the secret skills of leadership. Here's the secret part. When you do that, when you make yourself professionally essential to your boss and teammates, you regularly create opportunities for yourself to demonstrate your superior leadership skills. And I want to mention that this isn't some, I don't mean this to be an old-fashioned industrial age, wait your turn sort of mindset, wait your turn to be a leader. Business icons, global business icons that you would recognize, Malcolm Forbes of the Forbes financial empire, the last two CEOs of the Procter & Gamble company, the CEO of FedEx, Federal Express, Leonard Lauder of the Estee Lauder Cosmetics company, and 10 or 20 more international leaders that you would recognize, they all practiced followership relentlessly as they progressed in their careers and built their companies. Because followership is your link to that next level of leadership. If you're an individual contributor, demonstrating great followership will earn you that first leadership role. And if you're already a leader, remembering that you also have a boss, someone that you follow, if you continue to demonstrate exceptional followership, it will break you out of the pack of your peers. It will set you apart and get you promoted faster and into the roles that you really want. So I'll put the whole definition up there for a moment in case you want to jot that down or fill in your note-taking guide. That's what followership is, or what I mean it to be. So now let's jump in to how you put it into practice. We'll talk about the roles of a follower. And I believe if I had to use one word to describe what great followership is, it's facilitation. Facilitation. And in my industry, that works out really well in the training and development role because many people in T&D and in academia, I imagine at the American University of Cairo, you have many great facilitators. So the first role of facilitation is a valet. And I don't mean in the United States, often a valet means someone who will park your car when you go to a nice restaurant or hotel. I don't mean that kind of person. I mean the kind of valet that Alfred is to Bruce Wayne and Batman, if you like the Batman movie, or John Bates on the British film series Downton Abbey. I mean a proper British valet is the role that I mean. And what a valet does is they make themselves available to outfit someone for whatever clothes and accessories the situation calls for. They prepare them to be successful throughout their day. Perhaps your boss has a weakness. Perhaps they're not very good at the financial aspects of your company or of your team. Perhaps they're not very good at research. Whatever it is that your boss may not be good at, you can become good at that. Someone on your team needs to become good at that because you can't let your team fail because the leader has a gap that they might not even admit to. You can be a valet by making your leader's life easier and preparing them and your team for success. That's what I mean by the valet role. The next role I call a Socrates-like mentor. If you know certainly who Socrates was famous for asking tough strategic questions. And so by being a Socrates-like mentor, the goal is to know your leader's job well enough, your boss's job well enough to stimulate challenging, counterintuitive thinking. And part of this role is knowing when to provoke them and when to let it go, when not to provoke. And the goal is to amplify your leader's strengths, supplement their gaps, and train yourself to think like they think. In order to be good at this role, you have to understand their job. And by understanding their job well enough to ask those tough, provocative questions, that prepares your mind for that next level of leadership. The third role I call the chameleon role. Being a chameleon recognizes that you know when to be visible and when to be subtle or even invisible. Because great followership is about making your boss and your team look good, not immediately standing out yourself. And that often gets me a lot of concerned looks, especially from younger leaders here in the United States anyway, who think that if they don't immediately get credit, that people won't know who did the work. And I would tell you that it's been my experience in leading that people know who the dependable teammates are. People know who gets the work done. And so it's my opinion that if you can do that, if you can make your boss and your team look good and earn a reputation for doing what we call see around corners, if you can see things that other people don't see coming, perhaps you put an extra slide in your PowerPoint that answers a question that someone might ask, and you put it in the backup section. Or perhaps you add a tab to that Excel spreadsheet that explains a calculation that you know your leader will need the explanation of. If you can do that, and if you can prepare them for things that they aren't ready for, you will always be a standout, even while you're blending in. And then finally, Jack Welch, the former CEO of the General Electric Company, he said that the most important advisory role that he ever recognized was somebody who was a pastor and a parent. And pastors, they hear the sins and complaints of an organization without recrimination. And parents, they love us and they nurture us, but they make us take our medicine. Parents give us our coaching, give us our correction fast and straight when we're off track. And what Jack Welch is saying is if you can earn as a follower, if you can earn the parent-pastor trust, if people in the organization and your boss will come to you when they have concerns, when they've done something wrong and they're not quite sure how to recover from it, or they need advice, if you can earn that trust, you will become a very, very influential person for your boss and your teammates. And these roles are so important because business is dodgeball. If you can be facilitators of the success of your boss and your team, you make yourself indispensable. So on this slide, again, if you'd like to participate, you can go to the upper left of your screen and push the blue arrow, and you can place your arrows in a role that you think you could do a little bit better at or might like to work on moving forward. If you'd like to do that, I'll give people a couple of seconds if they'd like to participate. And I'm not seeing, so we'll go on to the next slide. We'll keep our conversation going. So the roles of followership are about a mindset, how you can serve without being subservient. Because again, I just want to be very clear that this followership idea isn't about being over-deferential. It's not about being obsequious. It's about how to demonstrate great leadership by being a great follower. So the roles are about how to serve without feeling subservient. The actions remind us what we have to do to lead to our followership. So I have a very unattractive piece of art on the wall of my office. It's a sticky note that I laminated that was given to me in my first job when I was flying in the Navy. And we'll go right there. You can't see it because it's not PowerPoint, but that's the note. It was my first day in my first squadron. And has anybody ever been a rookie or a new person to an organization or a team, new to your football team, new to your company, new in college? I think, of course, we all have been. And when you report aboard as someone new to a military organization, at least here in the United States, it can be a pretty competitive environment. It can be make you feel a little bit like you are in over your head and that people aren't going to accept you. And so I was filling out some paperwork, and this person came by and said, "Hey, rookie, are you the new Nugget?" Nugget is a term for being someone very new in a squadron. And I said, "Yeah, I'm the Nugget." And he said, "Look, you're not very useful to us right now because we're getting ready to deploy. We're about ready to leave our families and go away for 6 months. And so we're flying a lot to prepare for that. And you're not qualified in our airplane. So you're not very useful to us. But here's how you can become useful." And he wrote this note. He said, "Be productive, be innovative, be the expert, and be polite." And this became the foundation of my early career, and I believe that it's timeless, pure career management gold. This is a simple set of easy-to-remember tasks that will, I promise, make you wildly successful. Welcome to whoever that is that just joined us. We're glad to have you. Just be productive, be innovative, and be polite. And whoever just joined us, if you could mute your line. There's some background noise. That would be very helpful if you could just mute your phone. So let's talk about these roles. The first one is be productive. Whatever you do for your company, whatever you do for the American University of Cairo or for the company you work for, you produce something. It could be something tangible like spreadsheets or analysis, or it could be producing a curriculum. But it could be intangible as well. Perhaps it's client satisfaction or customer service, things of that nature. But whatever it is, earn a reputation for being a high-quality, high-volume producer of the goods of your company. And don't shy away from trying to be the best, because remember, it's a dodgeball world. It's very competitive. And if you can earn a reputation as being the go-to person when times are tough and people need results on a very short notice, that will set you apart and make you indispensable. You want to be somebody who can help solve the problems of others. So be productive. The second skill of followership is be innovative. The world has never required us to be more innovative. Think of how much technology has changed. This conversation that you and I and this group is able to have from across the world, and the fact that it's being recorded and people from all over the world could join it, that's pretty remarkable, and it's happened in a very short span of time. If you are the older workers in America anyway, that baby boomer generation, early in their career, they were using devices that are just ancient to us today. And what they don't understand is, in just a short span of 10 or 15 or 20 years of a career, how much technology has changed. And if you're an early career person that's on this webinar tonight, and you've got 25 or 30 more years to work, we can't even imagine what technology will be like then. In order to get from today to then, you're going to have to be innovative every single day. And some people will be innovative by taking what is and making it a little bit better every single time. And some people will be like the Steve Jobses of the world, who will come through and say, let's ignore what is and let's create what should be. And either way, whichever your form of innovation is, if you can enhance the way you and others around you think and solve problems, that will require innovation, and that will help break you out as well. The third skill of followership is be the expert. There's just no substitute for having an incredible amount of competence in your daily work. And this may seem like a very obvious point to you, but at least in offices in the United States, and I think it could be universal, people lose sight of how important it can be, what signals it can send when you are the go-to brain or the go-to set of skills for something. Early career people, nothing will set you apart earlier in your career than having a quick, broad knowledge of the business model of your company. If you can talk not just about your job, but you can talk about environmental and macroeconomic forces affecting your category, if you can talk about your competition, if you can talk about your customers, that will set you apart. And if you're later in your career, nothing will hurt your career more and damage your influence than obvious lack of staying current with knowledge and technology. Because remember, business is dodgeball. And this expertise, why this is important is because when you demonstrate expertise, it will lead to opportunities for you to share your knowledge with more senior leaders. And then when they see that you are capable of that, they will then give you higher levels of responsibility. So you really want to work hard to be the expert. And what I say to convey this is to keep your knife sharp. My father used to be relentless about keeping all of the knives in our house and his pocket knife incredibly sharp. He was of a generation, here in the United States, men don't carry knives in their pockets as much anymore, but my father was of a generation where a gentleman would never be caught without a pocket knife in case he needed that tool. And so he would often sharpen his knife in front of me and he would say, you know, Corey, there's nothing more useless than a dull knife. You can't depend on it. It won't work when you need it, and it will do more damage, ripping and tearing, instead of actual cutting. And while he was honing a blade, he was also using it 1,000 times in my life as a metaphor to remind me to always keep my professional knife, my knowledge, and my set of skills of technology. Keep that knife sharp and be ready to perform at the highest level so I could be an expert. Keeping your knife sharp will also ensure that you are being an expert. There we go. I'm sorry. The fourth skill of followership is be polite. There are many ways to be impolite in the workplace, and I'm sure it's the same in the Middle East as it is in America. I think sometimes what we'll call a lack of professionalism in people's day is really just bad manners. I think that we can all compete vigorously and we can disagree with each other and cling to our good ideas and the projects we believe in while still maintaining the manners we would require of our children. So don't be like this guy. Don't point your fingers and don't raise your voice and don't roll your eyes. And what young people, I think, fail to recognize is that when they do demonstrate these kind of behaviors, two things happen. They're less likely to grow friendships, influential friendships that are so important to a career. And secondly, they won't get invited to those kind of projects that could really advance their career because people won't want to work with them. And I don't know, perhaps in the Middle East, this isn't, in a business setting, isn't as big of a challenge, but it is over here, I believe, in the United States. So I would encourage you to be highly professional and polite in your followership. These 4 skills of followership, my squadron mate Terry's advice, is easy to remember, and it's the best career advice I have ever received. Be productive, be innovative, be the expert, and be polite. And why is this important? Because business is dodgeball. It's competitive, and there are winners and losers. And the best leaders never forget that everybody has a boss, and that by acting as a great leader down to their people, but also by continuing to be a great follower up to their boss, they will make themselves more competitive. So normally at this point in the conversation, I ask people to vote on now that, and I don't want you to change your mind if I haven't convinced you, but I'm wondering that now, understanding what I mean by followership and the skills of followership and how important followership is as a component of leadership, I wonder how many of you believe that now you can serve without being subservient. You can fulfill the roles and perform the skills of followership and make your boss and your team look great. And so how many of you now believe that that's a great job to have and it will lead to a stronger career? And you're welcome again down in the chat box. Would love to have you say yes or no. Give you a minute or a few seconds to do that. And people aren't participating today, so we'll just keep going. But typically, when I ask this question the second time to those large audiences, it will have gone the other way. I'll get 75 or 80% that say, yes, I see how followership can make me a better leader and more successful in my career, and that's generally the way it goes. So we'll go on to the next section. I'd like you to consider your answer to this question. And the polling isn't working, but I'd just like you to think about the learners. For those of you that are in the training industry, or perhaps they're at the American University of Cairo, just the students that you have, are they self-motivated to grow themselves quickly? Are they self-motivated, but they need what's called a WIFM, a what's in it for me? That's what that acronym means. How will I benefit? Do they need that kind of a reminder? Are they not very self-motivated? Are they not motivated that they'll learn if they have that strong reason to believe? Or are they only motivated to learn by being paid or forced? And again, the polling function isn't working, so I just want you to consider that, what you think about your learners. Over here, the answers tend to be C, D, and E. And so what I'd like to talk about next is something to think about when it comes to motivating people. I'd like you to think about, I have an investment opportunity for you if you can come up with about 680,000 Egyptian pounds, or 100,000 US dollars. But what I mean by that is, you are the investment opportunity I have for you. Did anybody, when I asked you at the beginning of our session to write down some place you would invest 100,000 US dollars, did anybody write down your own name on that piece of paper? Go ahead in the chat room. If you wrote down your own name, I would love for you to say yes, and if you didn't, you're welcome to just put no in the chat box. So here's what I'd like you to think about. No. Your company pays you wages. And in the United States, $100,000 would be a lot of money to earn. And again, in America, you don't have to earn $100,000 for you to cost your company $100,000. You could only earn $50,000 to $55,000 or $60,000 a year, which is still a very good professional job for a well-educated person. But it would cost your company $100,000 because of typical benefit packages over here. So what I'd like people to think about is the fact that Your company is investing a significant amount of money in you as a professional, and you have to live the roles and skills of followership in order to earn that investment every day. So this is just an opportunity for you to think about, am I earning my company's investment in me, in the excellence that I bring to my job, in the innovation I bring to my job, in the way that I build leaders that we need for the future? I'd like you to just think about, are you earning that investment that your company makes in you? And if you're like me, you deserve a heck of a lot more than that, right? And I say that sort of kiddingly because I think everybody is worth more than they're probably paid. So I'd like to share this quote with you by a man who you may or may not be familiar with, but in addition to being a music star here in America, he has a clothing line, he owns a national sports franchise, he's a very well-known person, and what he says is that he's not a businessman, he is a businessman. And what he means by that is, and how this impacts you is, you should be your very own small business owner. You are managing your own personal brand. The most precious asset you have are your ideas and your reputation. They make up your personal brand, and you should build that brand and nurture that brand as intentionally as Nike does its swoosh, as Apple does its Apple, and as McDonald's does its arches. Because your brand, your personal reputation, is the only thing that you can take with you wherever you go. And often, it goes ahead of you on that journey because people know your reputation. Your brand represents your cumulative total history of the results that you've delivered for yourself, for your teams, for your companies. Your brand is not just the what about you, but it's also the how. How do you get business done? And the with whom, the who do you do your work with. Part of your brand is what is there, but it's also what is not there. What are you not about in your career? And somewhere in your brand is also the promise of what will be. And so it's my experience that a brand is always either growing or weakening. It's always getting stronger or getting weaker. And so when you think about how your personal brand is, maybe it's once a year, perhaps when you get your annual review in your job, that's a time, just like your company does annual preparation, annual business planning to be ready for the next year, maybe that's a good time for you to do a personal assessment of your own personal brand and set some goals for what you want to do with your brand in the next year, because you are the CEO of your own entrepreneurial small business. You. And why is this important? Why is it important to nurture your brand? Well, because business is dodgeball, and you want to be worthy of your company's investment in you every single day. And the skills that you build are the thing that you can take with you wherever you go. So I believe that leadership begins with followership, and I build great followers with the same process I use to build great leaders. That's serve, build, and inspire. We serve others through our followership and also through our leadership. And we have to succeed in the paradoxically simultaneous roles of being a leader and a follower. Then we have to build. We have to be responsible for building our own skills and our own careers. And then when we become leaders, we inherit that sacred trust, that special responsibility to develop the people that work for us. And finally, we have to inspire. And we can inspire people not just by setting a great example, but by setting high standards, by stretching them to become more than they think they can, and by being ready for what I call certain career-defining moments, moments that count. I love this quote from the British Royal Navy from the 19th century called The Laws of the Navy. On the strength of one link in the cable dependeth the might of the chain. Who knows when thou may be tested, so live that you can bear the strain. You are a link in important chains with your family, important chains at work, important chains in your community. And your leaders and your family and your teammates need you to be successful in what I call career-defining moments that count. Now this picture is a special picture for me. I saved a life once, and I only mention this to set up what comes next. But I was working the deck of a pool, while swimmers were taking a long-distance breath-holding test. It was kind of an intense military process. And the rescue swimmer brought someone up from the bottom who I could tell by the purple of his skin hadn't taken a breath in a long, long time. And I just did what I'd been trained to do, and after what seemed like forever but was probably only 30 or 40 seconds, I got him breathing again and his heart going again. I had touched a life, but I hadn't really been aware of it, of what a big impact I had had until 20 years later. This is my classmate Greg and I at a football game at a reunion event, and I got to meet his wife, and I got to meet the two kids that he never even dreamed of having that day on the deck of that training pool. And I mention that only to set up this next moment that counts, that happened in a work environment. From time to time, I get to work in some of our plants to stay close to the work, and it keeps me close to our members and the work that they do. And one day I was paired to work with a young man named Brett. And Brett starts his day every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning with 10 strangers from our temporary labor pool. Every day we get people that come in to do some temporary labor. And Brett doesn't know these people, and they don't know him, and they don't know sausage. He takes them from being very ineffective, very un-team-like, to being a very, very effective team in about 2 hours. And the rest of the day, it was just a pleasure to watch him help these strangers become like a high-performance team. And so at the lunch break, I sat down with Brett, and I said, Brett, have you ever thought about becoming a formal leader here at Johnsonville? And he said, no, they made me go back to school, and frankly, I don't want to go back to school. I wasn't very good at school. And so being a learning professional, I sort of lived up to my obligation to say, hey, look, it's different when you're a grown-up. They treat you differently, and you can take courses you want. What do you think you could study? And he said, no, going back to college would take a lot of time, and it could take 3 or 4 years for me to get a degree, and that's just too much time. And I could have let it go. I lived up to my obligation to push a little bit, but I thought that it might be a moment that counts. So I looked across the table at Brett and said, Brett, how old are you? And he said, I'm 22. And I said, do you have a family? He said, yes, I've been married a few months, and I just found out I'm going to become a dad. And that was my in. I said, what do you want to be about as a husband and a father? And he said, I just don't want to have to want for things. I don't need to be rich, but I just want to be able to pay for things if my family needs them. I grew up kind of poor, and I just want to be able to take care of my family. And I said, Brett, that's fantastic. Do you realize you're going to have to work for 45 or 50 more years in your career? And his eyes got very, very big. And he hadn't thought about that. And I said, you know, if you've got to work for 45 or 50 more years, maybe taking 10% or 15% of those years and going back to school, you think you might be able to take better care of your family? You might be able to provide for your family a little bit better? And I could tell I'd gotten through to Brett because the rest of the shift, he was very, his mind was somewhere else. He wasn't making his decisions as quickly as he had before. And so I said to his boss on my way out the door that day, I said, do me a favor and encourage Brett to consider going back to school. And about a month later, I saw Brett in our training center at our company, and he told me that he had enrolled in a college program and that he was going to get his degree. And over the next 3 years, I got to watch Brett from time to time be in our learning center doing his homework and preparing for his study. And 3 years later, Brett graduated. And this is the wonderful family that Brett can serve, build, and inspire. And Brett did all of the work. I had only been one in a chain of nudges. But I had been right. That lunch conversation with Brett had been a moment that counts. So I would ask you, in your world, what would make you ready for moments that count? Who are the people that you can connect with and serve and build and inspire and go on to become more than what they think they're capable of? These moments that count occur because we put our professional futures into each other's hands. So I'd like you to think about what it takes for you to be a hero to somebody as you encourage them. How can you inspire them to improve themselves? How can you inspire them to speak up in a safety situation or when there's been a wrong that's been committed that needs to be corrected? How can you convince them to step up to crucial conversations and pass tests of integrity and loyalty and to address instances of arrogance and incompetence? And some of these moments are big and anticipated. You can see them coming from a long way away, and you can prepare, and you can get advice, and you can practice and role play. But many of them will come without warning and require you to muster up all of your professional courage in a moment that counts. I think in this world we stand on the giant historic shoulders of people who came before us. Much of what we have here in our companies and in college and the studies we can study and the opportunities we have, much of that is a gift from previous generations. And our obligation is to leave something more behind for future followers, leaders, and their teams. So I'm out to change the world one person at a time. So I love this quote from an early American president, John Quincy Adams. He said, "The influence of each human being on others in this life is a kind of immortality." So I would like you to consider how you can be professionally heroic and whose lives you can touch. And if you think you can touch just one person, I'd like you to think inside your head, close your eyes for a moment and see that person who needs your help. Maybe it's a student, maybe it's a colleague, maybe it's someone from another part of the company, or maybe they sit right next to you. But there's someone who you can serve, build, and inspire. And I'd like you to write that person's name down either on the worksheet, the note-keeping guide you have, or just a piece of paper. And I'd like you to say right now in your own head, say, I can serve, build, and inspire so-and-so. You can touch lives. So I'd be happy to stay on and take questions if you have them. You can learn more about me and about my book at thelensofleadership.com. But if you happen to be coming to ASTD's International Conference in Washington, D.C. in May, I have a session there. I would love to meet you in person. I will also be at ASTD's Middle East North Africa Conference next week in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. You can follow me on Twitter at Corey Bounce. You could connect with me on LinkedIn or on Facebook. And I won't try to sell you anything. I just, from time to time, 3 or 4 times a week, I'll put something inspirational, a quote, or some insights up on those. So if you choose to follow me, that would be wonderful. I must say shukran very much. I've enjoyed this opportunity, and I will stop now. And if there are anyone with questions, I'd love to answer questions. You can put them in the chat box. Thoughts about followership or struggles with leadership in your organization? Would love to start a dialogue with you. And if this has been helpful, I'd encourage you to share with some of your colleagues, because this WebEx is being recorded, and they can watch it through the American University in Cairo's WebEx server. Be happy again to take any questions you may have. If there are, I will say, I will try this. I will say shukran jazilan. I think that's thank you.